What if I told you that the most dangerous person in any room isn't the one shouting for attention, but the quiet one sitting silently in the corner? The one who's been pushed too far, too many times. Stay with me, because what Carl Jung discovered about human psychology might completely change the way you see empaths forever. Jung believed that every person carries both light and shadow within them, but in the misunderstood empath, this inner duality burns brighter than most people can handle. Society often mistakes empathy for weakness, assuming that someone who feels deeply must be easy to break. But Jung's research revealed something far more complex and in many ways far more intimidating, because the empath isn't weak at all. They're holding back. According to Jung, the human mind works in layers. The persona, our public mask, hides our true nature. But what happens when someone with powerful emotional intelligence removes that mask? That's where the shadow self appears, and what Jung uncovered about this shadow might surprise you. Empaths live in what Jung called the tension of opposites. They feel pain intensely, yet they know how to contain it. They sense deception clearly, yet they still hope for the good in people. This isn't naivety. It's what Jung described as the transcendent function, the ability to rise above inner conflict while holding both light and darkness at the same time. Do you think empaths are truly gentle, or are they simply choosing not to unleash the strength they keep hidden? Empaths have a rare ability. They can hold two opposite truths at the same time. But this gift comes with a heavy cost, and for narcissists, it should serve as a silent warning. An empath who has faced betrayal, manipulation, and emotional harm doesn't stay naive. They evolve. Jung explained that the most psychologically whole people are those who have confronted their own shadow and come out stronger. Empaths go through this process earlier and far more intensely than most people. Their emotional wounds force them to grow faster, deeper, and with greater awareness. They don't just understand light. They look darkness in the face and survived it. This is where narcissists make their biggest mistake. They see the empath's kindness and assume it means weakness. They believe they can control someone so emotionally open. But Jung's research revealed that the people who lead with love often have the strongest psychological foundations. Why? Because they had no choice. They had to build that strength piece by piece just to keep going. And this is where everything changes. Jung's theory of individuation teaches that every person must eventually confront their true, authentic self. For most people, this process is slow, if it even happens at all. But for the empath, betrayal speeds everything up. Pain becomes the spark for psychological rebirth, and this is the part most people never see coming. Emotional sensitivity isn't fragility, it's advanced pattern recognition. Empaths don't just feel emotions, they study them, they decode them, they remember every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal, not with bitterness, but with crystal clear understanding. They store it all. And once enough of that information builds up, something powerful happens, what Jung called the emergence of the self. When that moment arrives, nothing can stop them. Jung also observed that the most powerful transformations happen not in comfort, but in crisis. He called this principle enantiodromia, the idea that when something is pushed to its extreme, it transforms into its opposite. So the empath who was endlessly patient becomes unshakable. The one who gave without limits becomes highly selective. The one who forgave everything finally walks away for good. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. Jung taught that true strength is born when we integrate our shadow, when we stop ignoring our boundaries and start honoring them. The empath doesn't lose their heart, they gain a spine. And here's what will truly blow your mind. The moment an empath understands their power, the game changes for everyone around them. Do you think most empaths realize how powerful they truly are? Or do they only discover it after being pushed too far? Once an empath awakens to their true power, they don't just heal themselves, they transform everything around them.
The narcissist's games stop working. The emotional traps no longer catch them. The mask drops, and the empath rises, fully aware of who they are and what they deserve. According to Carl Jung, there is a major difference between being unconsciously reactive and being consciously responsive. Most people live through their wounds. They lash out, seek revenge, or try to hurt others the way they were once hurt. But a transformed empath, someone who has walked through the fire and come out aware, doesn't behave this way. They act from what Jung called conscious choice. They don't need to destroy the person who betrayed them because they've already fought and won a much harder battle, the one inside themselves. Jung said, "The greatest victory isn't conquering others. It's conquering the parts of yourself that would pull you down to their level." And this is exactly where the narcissist realizes their mistake. Manipulators rely on predictable reactions. They want you to chase them, explain yourself, argue, beg, and keep the cycle going. But once an empath reaches what Jung described as psychological autonomy, the entire game collapses. Jung also discovered that the most powerful position in any relationship isn't dominance. It's detachment rooted in deep understanding. It's not silence out of fear, but stepping back because you see the truth so clearly that you no longer need to argue or prove anything. An awakened empath doesn't retreat because they are hurt. They retreat because they are done. Have you ever reached a point where someone's behavior no longer upset you? Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally understood your own worth. And this is the moment when everything you thought you understood about power begins to shift. According to Jung's research on psychological types, empaths have what he called feeling function dominance. But this isn't emotional instability. It's emotional precision. The ability to sense inconsistencies, detect manipulation before it forms, and intuit what others try to hide. But here's the twist Jung identified. When that emotional intelligence fuses with hard-earned wisdom, something extraordinary happens. The empath stops being reactive and becomes strategic. They no longer move from pain, they begin to move from power. And the transformation that follows is not just rare, it's revolutionary. Jung had a name for this evolution, the transcendent function. It's the ability to hold inner tension without breaking, to face darkness without becoming bitter, to feel everything yet still choose clarity over chaos. When an empath survives betrayal after betrayal and doesn't harden, but instead becomes sharper, wiser, and more grounded, this transcendent function develops at a level most people never reach. This is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming whole and complete within yourself. An individuated empath no longer needs validation from others to feel real. They trust their own perceptions without waiting for approval. They stop chasing love from people who can't appreciate depth. They stop performing empathy for people who never returned it. And here's where the chills begin. Jung described something called psychological mirroring. Empaths naturally reflect the emotional projections of the people around them. That's why others feel so seen and understood in their presence. But when an empath is repeatedly used, manipulated, or betrayed, something shifts. They stop reflecting and start revealing. They no longer absorb dysfunction. They see the charm, the fake apologies, the guilt cycles, the manipulative patterns, and they reflect them back, not with anger, but with truth. And truth, Jung discovered, is the most destructive force against deception. Then comes what Jung called the return of the repressed. When someone suppresses their true self, their boundaries, or their power, it doesn't explode, it emerges. Not in rage, but in clarity. The empath who once tried to please everyone becomes steady and unmovable. They no longer debate, they decide. They don't over-explain, they act. They don't try to fix what is broken. They step out of the story entirely.
Do you think an empath becomes stronger because of their pain, or because of what they choose to do with that pain? This isn't cruelty. This is individuation in motion. This is the moment Jung warned us about. The moment when someone integrates their shadow, claims their worth, and takes back their personal power.
And here's the final revelation. The shadow isn't only made of darkness, it's also filled with unrealized potential. An empath's true strength was never only in their gentleness, it was in everything they held back, everything they never allowed themselves to become until now. For empath, the shadow doesn't just hold old pain or anger, it contains something far more powerful: boundaries, the ability to say no, the strength to walk away. Betrayal becomes the trigger that forces them to integrate the parts of themselves they once hid for the sake of peace. Jung discovered that integrating the shadow doesn't make someone colder, it makes them wiser. Empaths don't stop caring. They simply become more careful about who receives that care. They realize their empathy isn't meant to be poured out everywhere. It is sacred. It must be earned. And what emerges next is what Jung called the individuated self. And once an empath reaches this stage, they become unstoppable. Jung once said that the most dangerous individuals are not the ones acting from unhealed wounds, but the ones who have transformed their wounds into wisdom. This is the awakened empath. They have seen cruelty, they have lived through betrayal, and instead of breaking, they sharpened. They understand manipulation because they survived it. They recognize gaslighting because they escaped it. They sense emotional predators because they were once targeted by them. This isn't paranoia. It's what Jung described as hard-earned discernment. Do you think an empath becomes unstoppable because of their pain, or because they finally learn to protect their own energy? This is where the shift becomes permanent. According to Jung's theory of psychological development, there comes a moment in a person's evolution when they stop chasing completion in others and instead become whole within themselves. For an empath who has been betrayed, this moment isn't just healing, it's revolutionary. They no longer seek approval. They stop justifying their boundaries. They stop apologizing for their needs. They reach what Jung described as psychological sovereignty, complete ownership of their emotional world. But the final transformation is something even greater. Jung called it the return to the self, and it is truly powerful. Real strength isn't the absence of emotion, it's sensitivity shaped by wisdom. The fully awakened empath embodies this paradox. They still feel deeply, but now they love selectively. They still understand completely, but they engage cautiously. They still forgive, but they no longer forget. Jung believed the most integrated individuals are those who can hold both light and shadow with full awareness. The transformed empath has learned to be gentle with those who deserve it and sharp with those who require it. They've mastered what Jung called appropriate response, acting from clarity instead of reacting from pain. And here's the final truth that makes them untouchable. The highest form of psychological development occurs when a person no longer needs others to complete them. The empath reaches this stage not by shutting down, but by integrating every part of themselves. They don't become whole by pushing the world away. They become whole by choosing their place in it with precision. They no longer try to rescue people who enjoy drowning. They no longer chase those who choose to run. They no longer pour their soul into black holes disguised as people. Do you think becoming whole means caring less about others or simply caring more wisely? They've mastered what Jung called the art of conscious relationship, engaging only where there is mutual respect, real reciprocity, and genuine care. And once an empath reaches this level, no one, not a manipulator, not a narcissist, not even their own past, can touch them again. The end result is what Carl Jung described as the individuated empath, and they are one of the most powerful forces you will ever encounter.
Jung said that when a person integrates their shadow, confronts their inner demons, and emerges whole, they become a force of nature, Not violent or loud, but completely unshakable. A fully awakened empath doesn't seek revenge because they've grown beyond the need for it. They don't beg for validation because their worth feels carved into their bones. They don't fear being alone because they've become the kind of person they actually want to be alone with. They become what Jung called psychologically complete. Not perfect, but fully awake. These individuals take their deepest wounds and turn them into their greatest strengths. They're dangerous not because they harm others, but because they can no longer be harmed in the ways they once were. They cannot be manipulated, controlled, or broken. And that, according to everything Jung uncovered about human nature, is the single most terrifying thing a narcissist can face. Someone who has learned to love themselves as fiercely as they once loved others. This is the empath's true journey, from victim to sovereign. And it's not just healing, it's what Jung called the hero's journey of the psyche, a sacred descent into the dark, a confrontation with every inner shadow, and a return carrying unshakable strength. Which part of this journey do you think changes an empath the most? The pain they endured or the power they reclaim afterward? This is a reclamation of forgotten power, a rebirth that isn't just emotional but spiritual. Jung discovered that when suffering is faced with awareness, it becomes the raw material for wisdom. And the empath, the one who walked through fire, doesn't simply survive. They become a light, guiding others through their own darkness. They are living proof of one of Jung's most powerful truths. Within every wound lies the seed of transcendence. Within every betrayal lives an invitation to become whole. This is the psychology of the awakened empath. And once you truly understand it, you will never again underestimate the quiet strength of someone who has turned pain into power, wounds into wisdom, and deep suffering into their greatest resilience. If this message stirred something inside you, subscribe to Psychology Undone. Share this with someone who still believes empathy is weakness. And always remember this, an empath doesn't just survive betrayal, they rise from it. Do you believe that our deepest pain can become the very thing that shapes our greatest strength? Thanks for watching. Stay aware, stay empowered, and never forget the strength you carry within you.